It was 2:14 a.m. when the first 911 call came in from a quiet neighborhood in Ashfield, Indiana, a place where crime meant a stolen mailbox or a teenager's prank, never murder. But that night, something was different. The caller's voice trembled as she whispered through the line, "There's blood on the porch, and the door's wide open." When police arrived at Willow Lane, Unit 43, the silence was the first thing they noticed. No barking dogs. No humming streetlights. Just the low buzz of static from the radio and the crunch of gravel under their boots. The front door swung slightly in the breeze, its paint chipped and streaked with something dark, something unmistakably human. Inside, the air felt heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Detective Aaron Miles stepped into the hallway, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. The first thing he saw was a photograph, a family portrait lying face down, its glass shattered. He turned it over and saw smiling faces, a mother, a father, a teenage daughter, and a little boy missing his front teeth. They looked happy, frozen in a time before terror took root. But a few steps further, the illusion of peace collapsed. Blood stretched across the living room carpet like spilled paint. A chair was overturned, a lamp shattered, and a faint smell of iron clung to the air. There were no screams, no struggle now, only the aftermath, and the weight of something unspeakable. Paramedics were called in, but it was clear from the start that they were too late. Two bodies were found in the living room, the mother, 38-year-old Claire Hollis, and her 10-year-old son, Evan. Both had multiple stab wounds. Claire's hand was outstretched toward the staircase, as if she had been reaching for someone. Upstairs, officers found signs of forced entry, a broken window, muddy footprints leading toward a half-open bedroom door. In that room, on the bed, lay 17-year-old Rachel Hollis alive, but barely conscious, her breathing shallow, her hair matted with blood. She had a pulse, but her skin was cold, pale as paper. When she finally opened her eyes in the ambulance, she whispered three words that would haunt everyone who heard them: "He's still here." Outside, the neighbors gathered, their faces pale in the flashing red and blue lights. No one knew what to say. This was the kind of horror that belonged on TV, not next door. Reporters would later describe that night as the moment Ashfield lost its innocence. But for Detective Miles, it was more than a case. Something about the scene felt off, too deliberate, too quiet. The kitchen clock had stopped at 1:47 a.m., but the power hadn't gone out. The family dog was missing, its leash cut. And the father, 42-year-old Mark Hollis, was nowhere to be found. His wallet, phone, and car keys were still on the counter. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. By dawn, yellow tape wrapped the house like a wound, sealing in the nightmare. The coroner's van pulled away just as the sun broke the horizon, painting the street in gold. But no one on Willow Lane would ever forget that night. The bloodstains. The silence. The lingering question of why. As news spread across Indiana, one name became the center of every conversation. Mark Hollis, the loving father, the husband, the missing man. Within hours, he went from victim to suspect. And before long, the truth behind the Ashfield murders would unravel into one of the most heartbreaking cases in American history, a story of love, lies, and the darkness hiding behind perfect smiles. By sunrise, Ashfield wasn't just awake, it was trembling. Police cars lined both ends of Willow Lane, their red and blue lights still flashing against the pale dawn. News vans began to arrive, reporters whispering into microphones as cameramen zoomed in on the house wrapped in yellow tape. A once ordinary two-story home had become the epicenter of horror. Every window seemed to stare back at the onlookers, lifeless and accusing. Inside, detectives moved like shadows, careful not to disturb a crime scene that already felt cursed. Detective Aaron Miles stood in the kitchen, coffee untouched, his gloves stained from the night's work. "Two dead, one critical, one missing," he muttered, reading from his notepad. No signs of robbery, no forced entry downstairs, and a broken window upstairs that could have been staged. He glanced at his partner, Detective Lena Cortez, who was photographing a set of muddy boot prints near the back door. "Size 11, she said. "Could be male. Pattern matches a standard work boot. But it's too neat. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." As investigators swept the house, they noticed strange details: a family calendar on the fridge with every day in July crossed off except the 17th, the night of the murders. A half-eaten dinner still sat on the table: pasta, garlic bread, 2 glasses of wine. And on the counter, a birthday card written in a child's handwriting: "Happy birthday, Dad. I love you forever. Evan." The date at the bottom read July 17th. Detective Miles felt his throat tighten. "So it was his birthday," he said quietly. Cortez nodded. "Yeah. Maybe a family dinner gone wrong?" That theory didn't hold for long. When Rachel Hollis woke up in St. Mary's Hospital later that morning, she was surrounded by doctors, police, and the low hum of machines. Her face was pale, her voice cracked. But she remembered everything. "We were eating dinner," she whispered. "Dad said he wanted to show us something in the garage. Mom told him to wait. Then, he started yelling." Her breath hitched, and tears slid down her cheeks. "He had a knife. He said we ruined everything." The room fell silent. Detective Miles leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Rachel, did your dad hurt you?" She nodded, eyes empty. "He killed Mom, and Evan tried to stop him. He wouldn't stop. I ran upstairs. He followed me. I jumped out the window. That's all I remember." By noon, the story had already gone national. Headlines flooded social media. Birthday turns to bloodbath, Indiana father missing after family slaying. Surviving daughter claims dad was killer. Satellite trucks lined the street. Every neighbor had an opinion. Some said Mark Hollis adored his family. Others whispered about arguments, money problems, or his recent job loss. The community wanted answers, but all they had were questions. At the police station, Miles studied old photos of the Hollis family. Mark in a plaid shirt, smiling beside Claire at a 4th of July picnic. Rachel in her cheer uniform. Evan holding a trophy. They looked perfect, too perfect. "You ever notice," Cortez said quietly, "how the families that look the happiest are the ones hiding the deepest cracks?" Miles didn't respond. He was staring at a new lead, a voicemail found on Claire's phone, recorded the night before the murders. Her voice was urgent, trembling. "Mark, please, we can talk about this. The truth doesn't have to ruin us. Just, please don't do anything stupid." That message changed everything. The search for Mark Hollis became the largest manhunt in Indiana in over a decade. Helicopters combed nearby woods, police set up checkpoints, and volunteers handed out missing person flyers with Mark's face printed in bold black letters. But after 48 hours, there was still no trace, no car, no credit card activity, no phone signal. It was as if the man had vanished from the earth. Yet, Detective Miles couldn't shake one feeling: Mark hadn't run. He had hidden. And whatever he was hiding from wasn't over yet. By the third day, Ashfield was no longer the peaceful town it once claimed to be. News crews still camped outside the Hollis home, the flickering glow of their lights bleeding through the misty morning air. Neighbors avoided eye contact, children were kept indoors, and whispers of the killer dad echoed in grocery aisles and gas stations. The Hollis tragedy had spread far beyond the police tape, it had infected the town's soul. Detective Aaron Miles hadn't slept in 30 hours. His desk was buried beneath crime scene photos, financial statements, and witness transcripts. Each document told the same story: a normal family, no criminal records, no drugs, no debts that could explain the violence. But beneath the surface, a darker pattern was starting to emerge. At 8:46 a.m., his partner, Detective Cortez, dropped a folder onto the desk. "You're gonna want to see this," she said. Inside were copies of emails between Claire Hollis and an attorney from Indianapolis, dated 2 weeks before the murders. The subject line read, "Divorce and Custody Inquiry." Miles leaned back, rubbing his temples. So she was planning to leave him. Cortez nodded. And she didn't just want a divorce, she wanted full custody of both kids. She also mentioned financial inconsistencies in one of the emails. That could mean hidden money, fraud, or worse. The discovery cracked open a new theory. Mark Hollis hadn't been the picture-perfect husband after all. Further investigation revealed that he'd been laid off from his job 6 months prior, but still drove the same car, paid for the same house, and somehow managed lavish weekend trips that didn't match his supposed unemployment. Bank records showed multiple transfers to an account under another name, M. Hayden. Hayden, Miles muttered, flipping through the pages. Could be a middle name, could be a fake identity. Either way, he was hiding money. That afternoon, the detectives drove to the bank where the transfers originated. A manager confirmed that the account belonged to Mark Hayden, same address, same signature. The most recent withdrawal had been made the morning of July 17, the very day of the murders. What if Claire found out? Cortez suggested. She threatens to expose him. He loses everything, his family, his house, his reputation. Miles nodded grimly. So he snaps. But even as the pieces fit, something felt off. The brutality of the crime, the chaos, the missing dog, it didn't line up with a calculated man. It felt emotional, desperate, maybe even panicked. And then there was Rachel's statement, the way she described her father's voice before he attacked her. He said we ruined everything. What did we mean? Meanwhile, Rachel remained in the hospital, recovering physically but haunted mentally. Reporters called her the girl who survived. Her face was on every TV screen. But when Detective Miles visited her, she was quiet, eyes hollow, fingers twisting the hospital blanket. Rachel, he said softly, you told us your father attacked you. Are you sure it was him? She hesitated. I saw his shirt. It was red. He always wore it on his birthday. Her voice faltered. But, it didn't sound like him. Not really. It was like he was angry at someone else. That sentence lingered in Miles's mind long after he left the hospital. He replayed the audio from the 911 call, the neighbor's shaky voice, the faint noises in the background. There was something barely audible behind the crying. A second voice. Male. Whispering. He sent the file to the lab for enhancement. The results came back the next morning. The words were faint but unmistakable. You shouldn't have told her. Miles froze. Who was speaking? If that was Mark's voice, who was he talking to? And if it wasn't him, then who else had been inside that house that night? That question ripped open a new direction in the case. The detectives began combing through phone records, security footage, and social media accounts. They found something strange, 3 calls from Mark Hollis's phone to an unknown number on the night of the murders. The number belonged to a disposable prepaid phone, purchased 2 weeks earlier at a gas station 30 miles away. Someone was helping him, Cortez said. Or manipulating him. By day 5, a storm rolled over Ashfield, flooding the streets and washing away traces of chalk and candle wax left by mourners. But inside the police station, the tension was electric. Every new clue added another layer to the tragedy: lies, betrayal, money, fear. And somewhere out there, a man who might have been a loving father or a murderer was still missing. By the end of the 5th day, the Ashfield Police Department had turned into a hive of restlessness. Reporters buzzed outside like hornets, hungry for updates. Inside, the walls seemed to hum with tension. Coffee cups stacked in corners, case files spilled across tables, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights blended with the constant click of keyboards. Detective Aaron Miles felt the exhaustion sinking into his bones, but sleep was no longer an option. Every new lead seemed to dissolve into fog, every theory birthed more questions. The lab results from the voicemail had given them a spark, but sparks weren't enough, they needed fire. That mysterious whisper, "You shouldn't have told her," was their only thread. Miles replayed it again and again through his earbuds, closing his eyes, focusing on the cadence, the tone, the slight rasp in the voice. It wasn't Mark Hollis. He was sure of it now. Mark's voice, recorded in old voicemails, had a calm, even tone. This one was deeper, rougher, and laced with something darker. Whoever that man is, Miles muttered, he was in that house. Detective Cortez entered, holding 2 printed photos. Got something. Security footage from a gas station near I-70, time-stamped 2 hours before the murders. Guess who's there? She slapped the photos onto the table. The first showed Mark Hollis standing at a counter, buying coffee and a pack of cigarettes. The second showed him walking toward the exit, with another man beside him. The man's face was partially obscured by a baseball cap, but his body language was familiar, lean, confident, slightly slouched. He wore a brown jacket and boots. "Those look like size 11s, Cortez said quietly. The same print they'd found at the scene. "Who is he?" Miles asked. "Let's pay him a visit," Cortez said. The next morning, they drove to Tay Ote, through roads slick with rain and lined with empty fields. The address led them to a small trailer at the edge of a wooded lot. The windows were boarded up, but smoke rose faintly from a rusted chimney. Miles approached first, badge visible. Daniel Cross, Indiana State Police. Silence. He knocked again. The door creaked open on its own. "Let's pay him a visit," Cortez said. The next morning, they drove to Tay Ote, through roads slick with rain and lined with empty fields. The address led them to a small trailer at the edge of a wooded lot. The windows were boarded up, but smoke rose faintly from a rusted chimney. Miles approached first, badge visible. Daniel Cross, Indiana State Police. Silence. He knocked again. The door creaked open on its own. "Jesus," Miles whispered. "This isn't random. This was planned." But before they could search further, a noise outside made both detectives freeze, the crunch of footsteps on wet gravel. Miles turned just in time to see a figure darting into the woods behind the trailer. "Police. Stop," he shouted, sprinting after him. The man ran fast, weaving through trees slick with rain. Mud splattered across his jeans as branches tore at his coat. Cortez followed, gun drawn, her flashlight cutting through the dark. They lost him near a creek, where the tracks disappeared into the water. Miles stood there, panting, rain soaking through his jacket. "He's scared," he said. "He knows we're close." When they returned to the trailer, a storm had rolled in. Lightning flashed across the walls, illuminating a final discovery on the floor, a burnt photograph, half destroyed but still recognizable. It showed Claire Hollis, smiling beside Daniel Cross. Miles stared at it, thunder rolling in the distance. "This wasn't just about money," he said slowly. "There's something else here. Something personal." Back in Ashfield, as word spread that the police had found a connection between Mark Hollis and a man with a violent past, public opinion shifted again. Some believed Mark had been manipulated, blackmailed, or framed. Others thought the two men had planned the murders together. Rachel's testimony was questioned, analyzed, doubted. For every fact, a new rumor was born. That night, Miles sat alone in his car, parked near Willow Lane. The rain beat softly against the windshield, the Hollis house barely visible through the mist. Inside, the ghosts of that night still lingered. He thought of Rachel, her trembling voice, the whisper in the background, the missing father. "Who were you really, Mark?" he murmured. "And what did you do?" In that moment, he didn't notice the figure standing across the street, watching him from beneath the old willow tree. A man in a brown jacket, face hidden, motionless in the rain. The man in the shadows. 3 days after the discovery at the trailer, Ashfield was drowning in rumors. Every headline screamed a new version of the truth. Father and friend in murder pact. Missing man linked to ex-convict. Survivor's story under fire. But inside St. Mary's Hospital, none of that noise reached Rachel Hollis. Her world was quieter now, muffled by trauma and medication. She stared out the window of her recovery room, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. Every time thunder rumbled, she flinched. Every time a door creaked, her pulse spiked. Her father's voice still haunted her dreams, that deep shout, that final moment before everything went black. When Detective Miles visited her again, he didn't bring flowers or sympathy. He brought truth, or at least the pieces of it. He sat at her bedside, rain dripping from his coat. "Rachel," he said gently, "I need to ask you again about your dad. You said he attacked you, but you also said it didn't sound like him." Rachel didn't answer at first. Her hands fidgeted under the blanket. "I don't know what's real anymore," she whispered. "Sometimes I see him standing at the door. Sometimes I hear him calling my name. But then I wake up, and he's gone." Miles leaned forward. "Your father wasn't alone that night. We found evidence someone else was in the house. A man named Daniel Cross. Do you remember him?" Her head jerked up at the name. The color drained from her face. "Daniel," she said softly. "He used to come to the house. Mom said he worked with Dad before I was born." "He did," Miles replied. "But they weren't just co-workers. They were close. We think he may have been blackmailing your father, or worse." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand," she said shakily. "Daniel wasn't just some friend. He was my uncle." Miles froze. "Your uncle?" She nodded. "Not by blood. But he used to stay with us when I was little. Dad said he helped him out after some bad time years ago. Mom didn't like him much. They fought about him all the time. She said Daniel brought trouble." The room felt suddenly smaller. The implications swirled like smoke in Miles's mind. If Daniel Cross was a family friend, practically an uncle, then this wasn't a random intrusion. This was personal. He stood slowly. "Rachel, did your mom ever say why she didn't trust him?" Rachel hesitated, staring down at her trembling hands. "She said he knew something about Dad. Something from before they moved to Ashfield. She said if Daniel ever came back, we needed to call the police." That revelation hit like a hammer. Miles left the hospital with a pit in his stomach. Back at the precinct, Cortez was already knee-deep in old records. "You're not gonna like this," she said, motioning to a stack of files. Mark Hollis and Daniel Cross weren't just co-workers. They were both suspects in an armed robbery back in 2007, a case that went cold. The store owner was shot. The getaway car was found burned, no arrests made. Miles's mind raced. So maybe Claire found out. That's what she meant in her voicemail, "The truth doesn't have to ruin us." Maybe she learned about his past and threatened to go to the police. Cortez nodded grimly. And Daniel couldn't let that happen. That night, the police issued an official bolo, "Be on the lookout for Daniel Cross." A dangerous man, possibly armed, believed to be involved in the Hollis murders. But even as the search expanded across counties, no one could find him. Meanwhile, new evidence began to shift the narrative again. Forensics reported that the knife found in the Hollis kitchen, believed to be the murder weapon, only had one set of fingerprints. Not Mark's. Not Claire's. Not Rachel's. Daniel Cross. For the first time, the possibility took shape that Mark Hollis might not have been the killer at all, but a victim. 2 days later, that theory became stronger when a fisherman near the Wabash River called 911 to report something tangled in the reeds. It wasn't a body, not this time, but a wallet. Inside was a photo of Claire and the kids, a driver's license, and $86 in cash. The ID belonged to Mark Hollis. The wallet was found 20 miles from the trailer. No blood. No damage. No signs of struggle. Almost as if it had been placed there, deliberately. When Miles saw it, he felt something twist in his gut. "He's trying to tell us something," he said. That night, as storm clouds rolled over Indiana again, the case took a chilling turn. A security guard at a rest stop along Route 41 called in a report of a man matching Mark Hollis's description, gaunt, bearded, limping slightly. He'd asked for directions, paid cash for gas, and left before police arrived. Where was he headed? Miles asked over the phone. The guard hesitated. "He said something strange before he drove off," he replied. "Said he had to see his daughter, one last time." Miles hung up, adrenaline kicking in. "He's coming back," he whispered. "To Ashfield." And if Mark Hollis was truly innocent, if he was coming home, then someone else was about to make sure he never got the chance to speak. The first hint of Mark Hollis's return came on a rain-soaked Thursday evening. Ashfield was quiet, the streets slick with the residue of a late-afternoon thunderstorm. Windows reflected the eerie glow of streetlights, casting long, distorted shadows across the neighborhood. Inside the police station, Detective Miles stared at the phone, waiting for a call that would confirm what he already feared. Mark had been spotted, and he was moving closer to Willow Lane. By 7:12 p.m., the call came. A gas station clerk in a small town just 10 miles north had reported a man matching Mark Hollis's description. He looked exhausted, haggard, his clothes torn and muddy. Witnesses said he had been asking for directions, not running, not hiding. He was coming home. Miles felt a chill run down his spine. "We need units at Willow Lane," he instructed. I don't care how many cops we need. Everyone gets in position. He could be anywhere between here and the house in the next 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Rachel Hollis sat in her hospital bed, her hands gripping the rails, trembling. News of her father's sighting had reached her through a nurse who whispered the update like a secret she didn't want to tell. Rachel's eyes widened, fear mixing with a strange, fragile hope. He's coming back, she asked softly, almost to herself. Miles and Cortez coordinated the surveillance, parking unmarked cars along strategic points around the Hollis home. Every patrol officer on duty knew the stakes. The man who had been presumed missing or guilty was returning to a neighborhood that had become a crime scene, a spectacle, and a trap all at once. At 8:03 p.m., headlights appeared in the distance. A black SUV rolled slowly down Willow Lane, mud splattered along the tires. The car stopped 2 houses away from the Hollis residence. A figure stepped out. Miles squinted through the rain. The man was thin, his face pale and bearded, eyes wide but cautious. Mark Hollis. Alive. Miles's stomach twisted. Is he alone? Cortez asked. That's what we're about to find out. Mark hesitated for a moment, scanning the street. Then, as if sensing a presence behind him, he bolted toward the Hollis house. Miles and Cortez sprinted, radios crackling, lights flashing. The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Inside the house, Rachel was asleep for the first time in days. Or at least she was attempting to sleep. Her dreams were haunted by Daniel Cross, his shadow looming over her mother, over Evan, over the house. A soft tap at the window woke her. She froze. Heart pounding. A silhouette moved across the lawn. Mark Hollis, soaked to the bone, standing beneath the willow tree at the edge of the yard. His eyes scanned the house, then the street, searching. Confusion and desperation radiated from him. He whispered, almost to himself, Rachel. I have to protect you. Miles radioed units to converge slowly. No sudden movements. They couldn't risk spooking him. But something about his posture, the tension, the fear, the exhaustion, didn't match the profile of a cold-blooded killer. This was a man haunted, desperate, and alone. Rachel stirred, waking just as Mark stepped onto the porch. Through the rain, she recognized him instantly. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. Mark froze. Rachel, stay inside. Don't come out. But the moment broke the neighborhood's fragile tension. Residents peered through windows. Some gasped, some screamed. Reporters already outside started filming, the camera lights slicing through the storm. Suddenly, the sound of a vehicle engine cut through the night. From the opposite side of the street, a black pickup sped down Willow Lane, tires kicking mud toward the sidewalk. Miles recognized the vehicle immediately. Daniel Cross. The first confrontation was inevitable. Mark Hollis, the man presumed guilty and missing, now stood face to face with the shadow of the past, the uncle, the manipulator, the true threat. Rain poured down, drenching them both, turning the street into a battlefield of mud, water, and fear. Miles whispered into his radio, "Keep your distance. Don't interfere unless fired upon. This ends tonight." From across the street, Cortez raised her binoculars. Daniel had stopped the truck, stepping out slowly, fists clenched. His gaze locked on Mark. The tension was tangible, crackling like static in the air. Neighbors pressed against windows, children cried softly, and the storm above seemed to respond, lightning splitting the sky as though nature itself was witnessing the moment. Mark raised his hands slowly, voice trembling. "Daniel, it's over. Leave us alone." Daniel laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "It's never over. You ruined everything, Mark. You always ruin everything." Rachel, watching from the second-floor window, felt her knees buckle. The nightmare she thought she'd escaped was standing in the rain below her, her father, alive, trembling, and the man who had orchestrated everything, stepping forward like a predator. Miles exhaled slowly. The return of Mark Hollis had changed everything. Nothing was simple anymore. The narrative of father as killer dissolved under the storm, replaced by the chilling reality. The true danger had never been Mark. And in the shadows, Daniel Cross waited. The storm had intensified by the time Mark Hollis stepped fully onto the porch. Rain pounded against the roof, dripping in rivulets down the wooden steps. Each flash of lightning illuminated the street in stark white, revealing the black pickup parked on the opposite side, its driver's side door opening slowly. Daniel Cross emerged, chest heaving, fists clenched, his eyes locked on Mark like a predator sizing up its prey. Detective Miles and Cortez watched from behind the hedge, radios at the ready. "Stay calm," Miles muttered, though his knuckles were white around the grip of his flashlight. "We're in the middle of something dangerous." One wrong move and he didn't finish the thought. Mark's voice cut through the storm, shaking but firm. "Daniel, it's over. I've done nothing wrong. Leave my family alone." Daniel's laugh echoed in the night, sharp and hollow. "Nothing wrong? You think hiding from your past makes you innocent? You've lied, Mark. Lied to everyone, including me. And now Claire and those kids, they paid the price." Rachel, from the second-floor window, watched frozen, heart hammering. She couldn't breathe. Memories of the living room, the blood, her mother's outstretched hand, and Evan's pleading eyes flashed through her mind. She clutched the windowsill like it was a lifeline.